Okay, he's a renowned neurosurgeon and the United States Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, and he's on the White House Coronavirus Task Force. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Ben Carson.
Yes.
Dr. Carson.
Hey, delighted to be with you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being on the show. I have tons of questions. You know, we know that they are saying that minorities, the African American community, is disproportionately affected by this coronavirus pandemic. And we know that President Trump is committed to providing support to underserved communities. And that's been impacted by this virus. He provided the $60 billion in loans under the Paycheck Protection Program targeted to support minorities and disadvantaged communities. Can you please explain that program to everyone?
Yeah, it was basically a mechanism for filtering the money through various community development, financial institutions, and banks, particularly smaller banks, to the people who actually live in those communities. Part of the problem is that there aren't a lot of banks in many of those communities. So some of that is in the process of being worked out now so that we can make sure that the money gets to the right people. Recognize that there's been a long history of neglect of the African American community in terms of investment. Only about 1% of financial investors put money into that community traditionally. And that obviously is a big problem when it comes to people being able to develop and participate in a lot of the major projects that are going on. You know, until recently, if you wanted to qualify as minority or disadvantaged to get a grant from small business, you could not have a net worth of more than $1.5 million. Now, when they put that program in place, that was a lot of money, but that was decades ago. And it's, you know, it's still substantial money, but when you're talking about a business, you're trying to develop a business, you really have to migrate those numbers along with the social circumstances that are going on. Okay. So those are all the kinds of things that we're looking at right now and trying to fix so that we can basically level the playing field. I don't think anybody wants to necessarily have a big advantage. They just want to be able to play on the same playing field as everyone else.
Exactly.
So with Dr. Ben Carson, I understand that, you know, that we want to now level the playing field when it comes to the Black community. Why is it that it's happening right now? Why would put the Black community in this particular predicament in the first place?
Okay. Well, first of all, you know, people have been talking about disparities for decades, for a very long time. They've known there are disparities. What really shined the light on it this time is the medical conditions. You know, you had a population that has 13.4% African Americans, but over 50% of the people going to the hospital, and particularly the very bad outcomes, were in the African American community. And it's obviously because there are a lot of underlying conditions, heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, asthma, obesity, a whole host of things that would contribute to that. And in the past, people have looked at those things and they've said, let's send a brigade of people down with single manometers and take everybody's blood pressure and let's get them on medications. And that's all well and good, but that doesn't really get to the root cause of the problem.
Right.
The root cause of the problem are the conditions in which people live. And you've got to be willing to look at this thing in a holistic manner. You've got to be able to look at education, for instance, because people who are well educated tend also to be healthier because they avail themselves of the things that are necessary in order to maintain good health. You have to have good jobs. You have to have living circumstances that don't jam everybody together. And that's one of the reasons that we at HUD have worked so diligently on the concept of affordable housing and making that the big issue rather than, as previously, it was segregation. They said, these people are segregated. We got to break up the segregation. The reason that they're segregated is because they can't afford to live anywhere else. Okay,
Wow.
so what you have to do is open up the possibilities of affordable housing in lots of different places. And a lot of people got sort of anxious, and they said, but that means the government's going to come into our neighborhood and build these gigantic public housing facilities that are going to be the nidus for crime and prostitution and everything else. We don't want that in our neighborhood. I wouldn't want it either.
Right.
But we don't do that way anymore. Now we're talking about public-private partnerships, much smaller things that architecturally and culturally fit into the neighborhood, a holistic development. You know, it's a very, very different situation right now. And that can be done, as well as concentrating on some of those neighborhoods and revitalizing those neighborhoods and bringing in the things that are necessary, improving the school systems. One of the things that this coronavirus thing has done is it's showed us that it is possible to do a lot of things remotely.
Yeah.
There'll be a lot of people working remotely now from home, but also education can be done remotely. That's going to be particularly helpful if we can get broadband everywhere, you know, particularly in a lot of the inner city areas where people don't have access to it, a lot of the rural areas where people don't have access to it. And as we develop that technology, and it's developing very rapidly now, you can take the very best biology teacher and put them in front of 1 million students instead of 30 students. And you can begin to really close some of those educational gaps. I've been talking to Secretary DeVos about that and many others. And, you know, there are multiple agencies that are looking at this. President Trump wants to fix this at the infrastructural level, at the foundational level, and not just do a superficial job of putting a Band-Aid on something.
Okay, all right.
And just to piggyback on one thing that you was talking about, Dr. Ben Carson, you know, with the health of the communities and the Black community, what about the building up the health of the Black community with good fruits and vegetables and building up the immune system?
But all people, we noticed that in some of these inner and urban cities, that a lot of them don't have access to great grocery stores that provide the fruits and the vegetables.
And affordable fruits and vegetables, you know, whenever they go in to purchase fruits and vegetables, it's cheaper for them to go get a 2 for $2 for $1 or, you know, on a dollar menu. But for fruits and vegetables, something that can help build up their immunity, especially when it comes down to fighting off viruses.
No question about it. That is absolutely vital. And one of the things that I've been particularly thrilled to see as I've traveled around the country are in some of the developments, they're encouraging gardening. And people are growing their own fruits and vegetables. So you can't get any fresher than that. But also, when you look at the health disparities, one of the big problems is follow-up care. People don't get continued care, and they'd have a lot of problems. I'd probably be dead if I didn't have good care, but I'm not dead, thank God. But it makes all the difference in the world, and we have to figure out a better mechanism whereby people can get the kinds of follow-up and persistent care that really contributes to good health. And if you look at something like Medicaid, the average person on Medicaid gets about $9,100 worth of anything a year. It's higher on the older people, much smaller on the younger people, but that's the average. Now, can you imagine if you were to take $9,000 a year and give somebody a health savings account?
Wow.
And all of a sudden, they would be thinking very differently about their own health care and how they get it. And particularly if you then give them the ability to shift money in their health savings account to family members. So, you know, somebody is having a little bigger problem than everybody else in the family. Other people could give them some of theirs. And you could also buy your catastrophic health care because it would cost a lot less, because how many catastrophic events do you have?
Yeah.
And your life you know. So those are the kinds of things, you know, we're looking at all kinds of possibilities to really fix this on a long-term basis.
Wonderful.
Right.
Wonderful.
I heard you mention about the schools and how we're going to be changing things when it comes to our schools. And the president wants these schools and colleges back up and running soon.
Mm-hmm.
He's also doing something with these institutions that have experienced hardship due to this coronavirus pandemic. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, there's been a lot of attention to the HBCUs and the colleges and universities that exist within the opportunity zones and in some of the neglected areas, because they can be tremendous vehicles for education throughout the entire community where they live. Also, most of them already have access to computers and broadband, and can help tremendously by disseminating that kind of knowledge throughout the areas where they exist. So funding them, providing them with the technical assistance as well as the monetary assistance will make a big difference, not only for those colleges and universities, but for all the people. And, you know, education is one of those areas that I'm passionate about, as well as getting people out of poverty, because they go hand in hand.
Right.
You know, when I was a kid, I used to hate poverty. You know, some people hate rats, some people hate roaches and spiders. I hated poverty. That is, until my mother made me start reading books. And I read about all kinds of people, scientists and explorers and entrepreneurs. And then I began to understand that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you is you. It's not somebody. It doesn't matter what anybody else said. It doesn't matter what's going on in the environment. And I really started dedicating myself and, you know, became a very good student. But also, I didn't mind being poor anymore because I knew it was only temporary.
Wow.
I said, I can fix this.
Wow.
I don't have to wait for anybody else.
Right.
And
it starts with the mind. And that's why my personal opinion.
Yeah.
It just all starts with the mind. Wherever I always say, wherever you find your behind, your mind put it there.
That's
so
right.
that's my own. Yeah.
That's right.
Well, you can't emphasize that enough. And I remember a couple of years, you know, I said, you know, poverty has a lot to do with the way that you think.
Yeah.
And of course the left, oh, he said, you know, and then they just go crazy because they never want any responsibility to be with the individual. It always has to be somebody is doing this to you. But, you know, God is our creator. And he gave us these incredible brains for a reason.
And not only did he give us incredible brains, he gave us incredible immune systems too. So if we do right by our immune systems, our immune system would do right by us. I want to also piggyback off of the schools. I think that the president gave $1 billion to the HBCUs. Am I correct about that, Dr. Ben Carson?
Yeah, he's given twice as much as they've ever gotten before.
And more than any other president, I want to emphasize that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and he also, you know, I see that the Department of Education temporarily delayed student loan repayments and held interest rates at 0%. And I just wanted to make note of that so people can see exactly what the Trump administration is doing here. Absolutely.
Not only have they taken the burden off of the students, but also the homeowners.
That's right.
Moratorium on foreclosures and evictions, because if you're worried about your health and that of your loved ones, the last thing you need to be worried about is whether you're going to be kicked out of your house.
Right.
And those are the kinds of things that were enacted very, very rapidly. We just announced an extension of that program, and we will do what is necessary to keep people intact. Because what you have to recognize about this whole crisis that we're undergoing is that this is a crisis that is intentionally created, the economic crisis, in order to combat the virus. It was nobody's fault in this country that we have that virus, but it came on the back of a very strong economy, a strong economy. And all we have to do is bridge the gap. We have to keep things going until we get through this viral catastrophe, and things will pick up again. Now, will there be a lot of businesses that will be lost? Yes, there will be. There's no getting around that. It's sort of like a forest fire. It comes through, it burns all the underbrush. But what happens after that forest fire? A lot of new growth springs up. And, you know, this is America. This is a land of entrepreneurs and people who are very innovative. And believe me, because that economic infrastructure is still there, it will spring back very quickly. It won't be like 2008. That crisis came on the back of a very weak economy. And of course, it took a long time for that to recover.
That's right.
Right.
And you know, just listening to you speak, Dr. Ben Carson, I understand that the Black community is disproportionately affected by the coronavirus, but the Black community livelihood is disproportionately affected as well. So, you know, you stand 100% chance of dying from starvation, okay, versus Absolutely. A 99% chance of recovering from this virus.
Well, see, that's something that no one ever talks about. I'm glad you brought that up, because, you know, the vast majority of people who contract this virus are going to do well. Half of them don't even know they have it.
Right.
And it's been made into this, equated with, if you get the virus, you're going to die, or some horrible thing is going to happen. So everybody has become so frightened. And, you know, the fact of the matter is, as we've learned more about the virus, we've learned better how to treat it, how to be more aggressive early on and not wait until things have progressed to the point where somebody needs a ventilator.
Right.
All of these things have happened. But remember, the vast majority of people don't even need to go to the hospital.
Don't even need to go. So basically, we are all being manipulated by the media through fear and panic.
Yeah,
is what we're doing,
and
we're all focusing on the death instead of focusing on everyone that recovered.
Right. We're allowing the virus to control us rather than using our brains to control it.
I love it.
But the sad thing about the whole deal for me, sir, is that people, American citizens, especially the one that is disproportionately affected the most, is the one that's suffering the most because of this. It's like you're pushing this in front of people's eyes to say, this is going to happen to you. If you do this, you're going to die. But what about if you don't eat? If you don't work, you don't eat. What about
There's no question that if we allow the economic infrastructure of our country to deteriorate to the point that people don't have what they need for their own sustenance, a lot more people will die from that than the virus ever thought about taking out of here.
Wow.
And that's perspective.
Yeah. Dr. Carson, we know that the president is providing resources for these underserved communities.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that we keep hearing about vaccines. Will vaccines be mandatory?
I don't know that we'll ever make anything mandatory. I mean, this is America still.
Okay, so I want to bring this up, that these are issues that people are coming to us with.
Mm-hmm.
They have concerns with this bill, HR 6666. It's COVID-19 testings, reaching and contacting everyone. They call it the TRACE Act, and the HR 6585 Data Collection and Disclosure Act. The reason why people are having concerns about this bills, these specifically, is because it targets underserved minorities in their communities, and it even intimidates some that they will lose their benefits if they don't go along with the contact tracing and testing and all of that. So will testing be mandatory? Is it mandatory that if somebody go into underserved communities, they have to take a test, even if they don't have a fever, even if they don't have any of the symptoms?
Will they be pulled from their home?
Right. Is this something that's going to be signed into law? Because looking at these bills, it encroach upon our Fourth Amendment rights, our constitutional rights. So what do you think about that?
I think it's very unlikely to happen under this administration. I can't speak for the future administrations that may come along, but certainly it is well recognized by this administration that the Constitution is the supreme document and that we should always look out for the rights of our people. That's the basis upon which this country was formed.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. So even talking about this here, when I listen to Diamond talk about the tracing and tracking of individuals, it takes me back to the days of slavery. Whenever slaves was tracked, they couldn't go from one plantation to another plantation without a note. Right. And now here we are in the 21st century, and we're talking about this thing. It's taking me back to that point. What's happening to our country, and what type of mindset do a person have to have in order to want to even take this country back to those days?
I will say that there are two different forces going on in this country. There is one that strongly believes in independence and that this country is of, for, and by the people. And
That's
then
right.
there's another group that believes this country is up for and by the government. And they want people to just accept that you give the government all the power, the government will take care of you from cradle to grave. And of course, it sounds good to some people until you run out of other people's money.
That's right.
Whoa.
And that's what will happen. And it happens every time you put those kinds of governments in place. What do? Spend, bankrupt everybody, decrease the level of living, and take control of everyone's lives.
Wow.
If you can see anything that looks like that in our society, think carefully about it.
Think carefully about it. And like I said, you have your own mind. You can think for yourself.
Yeah.
Do you want socialism or capitalism?
Yeah.
Do you want to feel like you're free, or do you want to feel like a slave?
Yeah.
So that's what this is boiling down to, especially when we have governors that still keeping people stuck in their homes. They refuse to open up their states and let people go back to work.
They have the abortion clinics open, but the churches are closed.
I think people will prefer to go back to work instead of become dependent upon the government, who, if not careful, will bankrupt our whole society.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who wouldn't rather get a good job and take care of themselves.
That's right.
That, because we had a very strong economy, lowest unemployment in the African American community ever.
Yeah.
And we can get back there, and we can go even further. But we're using what we've learned from this to try to fix the infrastructure and level the playing field so that things can be good for everybody in this country. The American dream should be for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Because for me, it kind of seems like that every time, especially within the Black community, African American community, or minority community, it seems like every time we begin to get a little hope or get or catch a hold to something come along and just dismantle it. It's like it brings you back down to ground zero. Now you have to try to rebuild once again. And like you say, everybody is entitled to the American dream. And I don't think that it should always be that just the Black community is disproportionately affected by everything, especially if Black people are humans.
It's Americans. It's Americans that's been disproportionately affected because you have 30-some million Americans that's not working.
Right.
And it's ready to go back to work and not lose everything.
Yeah.
Well, I hope at some point the Black community will spend some time looking at history and look all the way back to slavery and notice how the attempt was made to keep the Black community divided. They would tell the house slaves that you're better than the ones in the yard. They tell the ones in the yard, you're better than the ones in the field, always creating that tension. After slavery was over, the light-skinned ones, you're better than the dark-skinned ones. And it just goes on, because the last thing they want is people to be working together and recognizing what their strengths are and building on that.
Wow. You're absolutely right. Listen, Dr. Ben Carson, thank you so much for joining us. If we have any questions somewhere down the line, can we bring you back on and you can just answer them for us?
I would be delighted. And Candy, my wife, said to tell you guys hello.
Tell her we say hello. We love
we
her.
Love her. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So there you have it, you all.
Yeah.
Dr. Ben Carson came, explained, and talked about some things that was affecting certain communities. However, the resources that's being put in place to help underprivileged and underserved communities.
That's right.
So thank you so much, Dr. Ben Carson. Thank you to all of you all for joining us.
Yeah.
And until next time, we'll see y'all later.
Bye-bye.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
My administration will take all necessary steps to safeguard our citizens from this threat.
Hysterical xenophobia.
Giving Americans a false sense.
Is it accurate that if these steps had not been put in place, it could have been 2 million people dead here in the United States?
Yes. No matter how hard they try to stop us, they can't. We built the greatest economy the world has ever seen, and we're going to do it again. Together, we're beating back the invisible enemy.
What the federal government did was a phenomenal accomplishment.
Through it all, the world has witnessed the unyielding resolve of our incredible American people.
Promise made, promise kept.
And I'm fighting for you, and I love doing it with everything that I have. And you know that. With the grace of God, we will win this war, and we will win this war quickly. And we will make America great again.